He was just a man holding a mop, a ghost in a blue uniform. She was a billionaire CEO who thought the world bowed at her feet. But when a billion-dollar merger was seconds from dying, the janitor opened his mouth. What he said in flawless Japanese destroyed her completely. The marble floors of Whitmore International's global headquarters in Chicago gleamed like fresh ice, reflecting the imposing angular architecture of the 54th floor. For Nolan Pierce, those floors were both a sanctuary and a prison. At 38, Nolan had calloused hands, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of chronic sleep deprivation, and a faded blue uniform bearing the name of a third-party sanitation contractor. He was the evening maintenance supervisor, a polite title for the man who wiped up, spilled espresso, emptied recycling bins, and buffed the executive suite until it mirrored the city skyline. Nobody in the towering glass cathedral of commerce knew that Nolan Pierce possessed a master's degree in East Asian linguistics, or that he had spent nearly a decade living in Kyoto and Tokyo as a senior cultural liaison for an international trade conglomerate. To them, he was an invisible machine, a fixture as unacknowledged as the potted ficus in the lobby. Nolan preferred the invisibility. It kept him focused on his singular reality, his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie. 2 years ago, a catastrophic pediatric heart condition had turned their lives into a nightmare of intensive care units, terrifying diagnoses, and mounting medical debt. When his high-pressure corporate firm refused to offer the flexibility he needed to attend Sophie's unpredictable hospitalizations, Nolan made a sacrifice only a parent could understand. He resigned, cashed out his agonizingly small 401k to pay the immediate surgical costs, and took a unionized custodial job. The pay was a fraction of his former salary, but the union's premium health insurance plan covered Sophie's specialized treatments at 100%, and the night shifts allowed him to be by her side during the day. He traded his tailored suits for a mop bucket, burying his pride to keep his daughter's heart beating. He was emptying the shredder bins outside the corner office when he heard the sharp, terrifying cadence of Camilla Whitmore's footsteps. Camilla was a force of nature, a self-made billionaire at 42, whose reputation for ruthlessness was outmatched only by her bank account. She had taken a mid-sized logistics firm and cannibalized her competitors, building an empire through hostile takeovers and aggressive cost-cutting. She wore bespoke Italian suits, demanded perfection, and fired employees with a chilling lack of emotion. Rumors around the water cooler claimed she once terminated a senior vice president for using the wrong font in a quarterly report. To Camilla, people were either assets or obstacles. There was no in-between. "I don't care if a hurricane is hitting the eastern seaboard, Derek. Get the Tokyo team on the line, now." Camilla's voice sliced through the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. Derek Lawson, her notoriously high-strung executive vice president, scrambled backward out of her office, nearly tripping over Nolan's supply cart. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore, but Sato Industries operates on strict, traditional protocols. They are insisting on an in-person finalization of the Kyoto Pacific merger. Mr. Kenjiro Sato is flying in tomorrow." Camilla stepped into the doorway, her icy blue eyes narrowing. "Then we finalize it tomorrow. This merger gives us control of the Pacific supply lines. It will triple our market cap. Nothing, and I mean nothing, will jeopardize this. Have our lead translator, Greg Chambers, briefed and on standby. Sato is old school. He despises English business jargon. We play his game, we win his fleet." "Understood." Completely, Camilla," Derek stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. As Camilla turned back into her office, her gaze flicked downward, landing on Nolan, who was quietly securing a trash bag. Her expression curdled into a sneer of pure disdain. "You!" she snapped. Nolan stood up, slowly, keeping his posture submissive. "Yes, ma'am." My office smells like cheap industrial lemon. I explicitly ordered the maintenance staff to use the unscented eco-grade cleaner on the executive floor. Are you incapable of reading a basic memo, or is reading above your pay grade? She demanded, her voice dripping with venom. Nolan kept his face completely neutral, an old habit from his days in high-stakes negotiations. I apologize, Ms. Whitmore. The supply room ran out of the unscented grade this afternoon. I can switch to warm water and a microfiber cloth for your suite immediately. Do it, and if you ever bring that toxic slop near my office again, I'll have your contractor replace you before your shift ends. She threatened, slamming the heavy oak door shut. Derek let out a breath he had been holding, shooting Nolan a sympathetic but pathetic glance before scurrying down the hall. Nolan simply picked up his cart and walked toward the janitor's closet. He didn't feel anger, only a hollow exhaustion. Tomorrow was a big day. Sophie was scheduled for a crucial echocardiogram in the morning, and the hospital billing department had been calling about a disputed copay. He didn't have the luxury of pride. He spent the rest of the night scrubbing the floors in silence, thinking only of his daughter's fragile smile, completely unaware that tomorrow, the quiet, invisible world he had built for himself was going to violently collide with Camilla Whitmore's billion-dollar ambitions. The tension on the 54th floor the next afternoon was thick enough to choke on. Nolan had swapped shifts with a morning worker to accommodate Sophie's afternoon doctor appointment, meaning he was on duty during the peak chaos of the executive workday. He was assigned to standby maintenance, essentially waiting in the shadows to immediately clean up any spills or messes while the VIP guests were present. At precisely 1 p.m., the elevator doors chimed, and Mr. Kenjiro Sato, the venerable CEO of Sato Industries, stepped out, followed by a small entourage of executives, including his sharp-eyed right-hand man, Hiroshi Tanaka. Sato was a legend in the Asian markets, a man of profound traditional values who viewed business partnerships as marriages of honor, not just exchanges of capital. He moved with a deliberate, quiet dignity. Camilla Whitmore was waiting with a dazzling, practiced smile. She extended her hand. Sato bowed slightly politely, ignoring her hand, causing a microscopic twitch in Camilla's jaw, before she recovered and bowed awkwardly in return. "Welcome to Chicago, Mr. Sato," Camilla said smoothly. She turned expectantly to her left, waiting for Greg Chambers, her $200,000 a year corporate translator, to interpret the greeting into the formal honorific Japanese keigo that Sato required. But Greg wasn't there. Instead, Derek Lawson was standing there looking like he was about to vomit. He leaned in and whispered frantically into Camilla's ear. "Greg is in the ER. Severe food poisoning. He can't stand up, let alone speak. I pulled a junior analyst from the international desk. He studied in Osaka for 2 years. It's the best I could do on zero notice." Camilla's eyes flashed with a murderous rage, but she maintained her plastered smile for the guests. She gestured toward a terrified-looking 20-something kid in an ill-fitting suit standing near the boardroom doors. "Mr. Sato, please right this way. We have much to discuss." Nolan, currently tasked with polishing the brass fixtures near the conference room, watched the procession enter the grand boardroom. The walls were made of soundproof smart glass, but the door remained cracked open as the caterers wheeled in trays of water and coffee. Nolan kept his head down, methodically wiping the brass, but his ears naturally tuned into the rhythm of the language he hadn't spoken aloud in over 2 years. Inside the meeting was rapidly turning into a spectacular train wreck. Camilla, driven by arrogance and impatience, was pushing hard. "Mr. Sato, our infrastructure combined with your maritime fleet will eliminate overhead by 22%. We want full integration within 6 months, with Whitmore retaining a 60% voting majority on the new board." She looked at the junior analyst. "Tell him that, and make it sound appealing." The young analyst was sweating profusely. He had studied conversational Japanese in college and spent time drinking in Osaka, but high-level corporate negotiations required an entirely different vocabulary. He stammered, cleared his throat, and began to speak. From the hallway, Nolan paused his polishing rag. He winced. The kid wasn't just butchering the grammar. He was using overly casual, almost disrespectful phrasing. He used the word kukyo, meaning emptiness, or a hollow void, instead of togo integration. And he referred to the esteemed Mr. Sato, with a casual pronoun that one might use to address a drinking buddy, not a billionaire patriarch. Inside the room, Hiroshi Tanaka's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Sato's face remained a mask of stone, but his posture went rigidly stiff. "Mr. Sato." Tanaka spoke in English, his tone dangerously thin. "Your representative's words are unusual. Are you demanding a takeover of our assets while offering us empty promises in return?" Camilla blinked, losing her composure for a fraction of a second. "What? No, I said synergy and shared dominance." "Boy," she snapped at the analyst. "What did you say to them?" I translated it, Mom, I swear." The kid panicked. "I told them we want the boats and we want the control." Mr. Sato slowly stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. It was the universal gesture of a concluded meeting. "Ms. Whitmore," Sato said, his heavily accented English carrying a quiet, devastating authority. "A partnership requires mutual respect. You bring a boy who speaks to us like street merchants demanding our legacy for your profit. There is no honor here. The merger is cancelled." Camilla's face drained of color. $1 billion was evaporating before her eyes. Desperation cracked her polished veneer. "Mr. Sato, wait. Please, this is a misunderstanding. The translator is an idiot. We hold you in the highest regard." Sato turned toward the door, ignoring her. Nolan, still standing by the cracked doorway, looked at the tragic scene. He shouldn't interfere. It wasn't his problem. Camilla Whitmore was a tyrant who treated him like dirt. Let her burn. Let her empire lose its billion-dollar prize. But then he remembered a fundamental truth. If the company lost this merger, stock prices would plummet. Layoffs would begin by Friday. The union maintenance contract would be the first to be renegotiated or slashed. If he lost his insurance, Sophie would lose her cardiologist. Camilla Whitmore's failure was a luxury she could afford. Nolan couldn't. As Sato reached the heavy oak doors, a janitor's supply cart suddenly blocked the exit. Nolan stepped into the doorway, holding a polishing cloth, his blue uniform stark against the sea of Armani and Tom Ford. He bowed a perfect 45-degree Saikere bow, held for exactly 3 seconds to demonstrate profound respect. When he straightened, he looked directly at Kenjiro Sato and spoke. "Sato shacho kono tabi wa tsutanai tayo de fuyukai na omoi, o sasete shimai, fukaku o wabi, moshiagemasu." Nolan's voice rang out, resonant and perfectly calibrated. "President Sato, I offer my deepest apologies for the clumsy and displeasing reception you have endured today." The boardroom went dead silent. The young analyst gasped. Tanaka's jaw literally dropped. Mr. Sato stopped in his tracks, his eyes locking onto the man in the blue uniform. Nolan didn't stop. He seamlessly transitioned into flawless deferential keigo, the highest form of business, Japanese articulating the nuances the boy had missed. "Whitmore-sha, wakiko no dento to koseki ni taishite seidaigen no kei o haraite orimasu. Sakihodo no hatsugen wa togo ni yoru souho no hanhei. Oi to shita mono de ari shihai o mo kuroumu mono de wa gozaimasen." Whitmore International holds the utmost reverence for your legacy and achievements. The prior statement was intended to propose mutual prosperity through integration, never an attempt at dominance. Camilla, recovering from her shock, felt a surge of territorial fury. She had no idea what this man had just said, but a member of the cleaning staff had just hijacked her boardroom. Her pride blinded her to the fact that he was throwing her a lifeline. "What do you think you are doing?" Camilla shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "Get out of my boardroom immediately. Janitors don't speak here. Security. Derek, call security." Nolan didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes respectfully lowered towards Sato. Sato slowly raised his hand, gesturing for silence. The sheer authority of the old man's movement made Camilla freeze, the word security dying in her throat. Sato looked at Nolan, studying the blue uniform, the faded name patch, and then the intelligent, weary eyes of the man wearing it. "Anata wa dare desu ka?" Sato asked softly. "Who are you?" "Watashi wa tada no seisoin desu, Sato shacho," Nolan replied, a faint, humble smile touching his lips. "Shikashi chichi demo arimasu. Kono kaisha ga sekinin o harae nakereba, musume no nia o kogaru toki ga dekimasen. Sagatte kono keikaku o tomete kudasai. I am Meriri, Janita, President Sato, but I am also a father. If this company does not succeed, I cannot protect my daughter's life. Therefore, I had to clear this misunderstanding." Sato's stoic expression broke. A profound look of surprise, followed by deep respect, washed over the billionaire patriarch's face. He turned slowly toward Camilla Whitmore, who was standing paralyzed, her face flushed with rage and confusion. "Ms. Whitmore," Sato said in English, his voice echoing in the silent room, "you have deeply insulted me today." He pointed a trembling, authoritative finger at Nolan. "But this man holding your rags, possesses more honor and intellect than your entire executive board combined." Sato walked back to the massive mahogany table and pulled out his chair, sitting down deliberately. "I will stay," Sato announced to the frozen room. "But under one condition." He looked directly at Camilla, his eyes turning to steel. "This man translates the rest of our negotiation. If he leaves this room, Sato Industries leaves this continent." Camilla Whitmore, a woman who controlled thousands of lives with the snap of her fingers, stood completely powerless, her billion-dollar empire entirely in the hands of a single dad who made $15 an hour. The silence in the executive boardroom was deafening, save for the faint hum of the city traffic, drifting up from Wacker Drive, 54 floors below. Camilla Whitmore's perfectly manicured nails dug into the expensive leather of her chair. She was vibrating with a toxic mixture of humiliation and fury. A woman who regularly dined with senators and stripped corporate rivals down to their studs was now entirely dependent on a man who, 20 minutes ago, she had threatened to fire over lemon-scented floor cleaner. Derek Lawson, her executive vice president, stood frozen near the caterer's cart, looking as though he might pass out. Nolan Pierce did not hesitate. He parked his plastic supply cart neatly against the glass wall, unclipped the heavy ring of brass master keys from his belt so they wouldn't clatter, and took the empty leather chair beside the junior analyst. The young kid, looking at Nolan with pure hero worship, practically scrambled out of his way. "Shall we proceed, Ms. Whitmore?" Nolan asked in English, his tone stripped of the submissive janitorial deference he usually projected. It was the crisp, commanding voice of a seasoned negotiator. Camilla swallowed her pride like a shard of glass. "Tell them," she gritted out her eyes, flashing with a promise of future retribution, "that we are willing to offer a 40% equity stake in the Pacific supply chain, provided we maintain absolute operational control of the Yokohama shipping hubs." Nolan turned to Mr. Sato. He didn't just translate her words, he transformed them. He took Camilla's aggressive zero-sum phrasing and wove it into a tapestry of mutual respect and strategic alignment. "Whitmore sha wa Yokohama no kyoten ni oite, une no shudoken o motomeru koto, o tian shite orimasu." Nolan spoke, his cadence steady. "Shikashi kore wa keshite, shihai o imi suru mono de, Wanaku sato sangyo ni 40% のみ分を保証し共同で到達する目標です。Whitmore proposes leading the operational efforts at the Yokohama hubs. However, this is by no means an attempt to dominate, but rather a strategy to guarantee Sato Industries a 40% equity stake as we reach our shared goals. Mr. Sato leaned forward, steepling his fingers. He responded rapidly in Japanese, bypassing his own translator, Hiroshi Tanaka, to speak directly to Nolan. Operation control is one thing, but your CEO does not understand the current maritime disruptions. The recent Panama Canal drafts and the Maersk logistics bottlenecks mean Yokohama cannot be run on a purely Western algorithm. Does she know this? Nolan didn't immediately translate this back to Camilla. Instead, he drew on his own decade of experience managing Asian supply chains before his life fell apart. She relies on aggressive quarterly metrics, Sato Shacho. Nolan replied softly in Japanese, ensuring Camilla couldn't understand the critique of her leadership. But I understand your concern. If we implement a staggered integration, allowing your senior dockmasters to retain override authority for the first 18 months, it will bypass the algorithms and protect the cargo flow. Sato's eyes widened. He stared at the man in the faded blue uniform. You speak like a logistics director. Where did you learn this? I was the senior liaison for Conrad and Mitchell Global for 9 years, Nolan answered honestly. Before life necessitated a change in my priorities. What are you saying to him? Camilla snapped, slamming her hand on the mahogany table. Translate. You are here to repeat my words, not hold a private conversation. You arrogant— Ms. Whitmore, Sato interrupted in harsh, heavily accented English. He raised a hand, silencing her instantly. Mr. Pierce is explaining the nuances of the Panama bottlenecks. He just saved your logistics timeline. I suggest you listen to him. Camilla's jaw snapped shut. The color drained from her face as she realized that Mr. Sato had not only learned the janitor's name from his uniform patch, but was actively favoring his business acumen over her own. For the next 2 hours, the dynamic in the room fundamentally shifted. Nolan ceased being a mere mouthpiece. As Camilla threw out ruthless hardline demands, Nolan filtered them, softening the edges and interjecting crucial cultural and logistical bridges that kept Sato at the table. When the negotiations touched on employee retention, Nolan skillfully ensured that the unionized dock workers in both Chicago and Tokyo were protected, a subtle victory for his own working-class reality. By 4 p.m., the atmosphere had transitioned from hostile to deeply collaborative. Sato Industries agreed to the merger. It was a monumental victory that would send Whitmore International's stock into the stratosphere. Mr. Sato stood up, buttoning his jacket. He bypassed Camilla entirely and walked straight to Nolan. The billionaire patriarch extended his hand. Nolan wiped his own calloused hand on his uniform trousers before shaking it. You are a man of profound, hidden depths, Mr. Pierce, Sato said quietly in English. Your daughter is fortunate to have a father who will shoulder such indignity for her survival. Thank you, sir. Nolan whispered, his throat suddenly tight. Sato offered a curt, formal bow to Camilla, who was desperately trying to arrange her features into a victorious smile, and exited the boardroom with his entourage. The heavy oak doors clicked shut. The billion-dollar deal was secured. Camilla stood in the silence of the room, looking at the signed preliminary term sheet. Then she slowly turned her gaze to Nolan. The mask of professionalism fell away, revealing the vindictive tyrant beneath. You think you're a hero? Camilla hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. You think because you pulled a parlor trick and humiliated me in front of my most important client that I owe you something? Nolan calmly picked up his brass keys. I don't think you owe me anything, Ms. Whitmore. I simply did what was necessary to ensure the company stays afloat. I have flaws to mop. No, you don't, Camilla sneered, her blue eyes turning to ice. You bypassed the chain of command. You interfered in executive negotiations without clearance, and you disrespected me in my own boardroom. You are a liability. You're fired. Clear out your locker and leave the building immediately." Derek Lawson gasped. "Camilla, you can't be serious. He just saved the Sato merger." "I am the CEO, Derek," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "I saved this merger. He is a janitor. Get him out of my sight before I call building security to throw him out." Nolan didn't argue. He knew men like Camilla Whitmore. They would rather burn their own empires to the ground than admit they needed help from the people they stepped on. He felt a crushing weight descend on his chest. His union insurance, the payments for the cardiology team at Lurie Children's Hospital, Sophie's echocardiogram tomorrow. It was all gone. He offered Camilla a pitying look, grabbed his supply cart, and walked out of the boardroom without a single word. The next morning, the grand lobby of the Peninsula Chicago Hotel was buzzing with corporate attorneys, financial reporters, and the scent of expensive coffee. Today was the official signing ceremony. Camilla Whitmore arrived wearing a triumphant red power suit, flanked by her legal team. She was ready to take her victory lap. Nolan Pierce, meanwhile, was sitting in a sterile waiting room at Lurie Children's Hospital, holding his 6-year-old daughter's small hand as they waited for her name to be called. He had spent the entire night frantically applying for emergency Medicaid and drafting cover letters. The fear was a living thing in his stomach, but he masked it with a gentle smile for Sophie. Back at the Peninsula, Camilla sat at the massive oak table, her fountain pen poised over the final contract. Mr. Sato sat opposite her, his face impassive. Next to Sato was his lead American legal counsel, William Standish, a silver-haired shark of a lawyer. Everything seems to be in order. Camilla beamed, ready to sign. "One moment, Ms. Whitmore," William Standish interrupted, sliding a thick addendum across the table. "Mr. Sato has authorized a final, non-negotiable stipulation to the merger. It must be signed by your board of directors before the ink dries on the primary contract." Camilla frowned, her pen hovering. "We agreed to all terms yesterday. What is this?" She pulled the document toward her. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon and then stopped dead on page 3. All the blood drained from her face. Furthermore, Sato Industries requires the immediate creation of a new executive position, Vice President of Pacific Integration. This position will possess full veto power over logistics algorithms and supply chain management. This role must be unconditionally awarded to Mr. Nolan Pierce with a starting compensation package commensurate with executive leadership, including comprehensive top-tier medical benefits. Failure to secure Mr. Pierce in this role will result in the immediate nullification of this merger. "Is this a joke?" Camilla choked out her voice, pitching upward in panic. "I fired him. He's a janitor." Mr. Sato leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Camilla with the crushing weight of a collapsing star. "You fired the man who saved your company because your ego was bruised. You are a small, arrogant woman, Ms. Whitmore. I do not trust you to manage my ships. I trust the man who understands honor sacrifice and the Panama supply bottlenecks." "I will not be blackmailed in my own city," Camilla snapped, standing up. "My board will never approve the elevation of a sanitation worker to a vice presidency." "On the contrary, Camilla," a deep voice boomed from the back of the suite. Charles Arrington, the chairman of Whitmore International's board of directors, stepped out from the shadows. He had been quietly invited by Standish an hour prior. Arrington looked at Camilla with utter disgust. "The board has already convened an emergency digital vote this morning," Arrington said coldly. "We reviewed the audio logs of the negotiation. We know what happened. Mr. Pierce secured a deal you were actively destroying. The board unanimously approves the addendum." Camilla stumbled back, her hand gripping the edge of the table. "Charles, you can't do this. I built this company, and you almost lost it over a bruised ego, Arrington countered. Sign the addendum, Camilla, or the board will ask for your immediate resignation. At 10:45 a.m., Nolan's cheap prepaid cell phone buzzed in the hospital waiting room. He answered it hesitantly. Mr. Pierce. The voice on the other end was smooth and professional. This is William Standish, legal counsel for Sato Industries. I am sitting here with Mr. Kenjiro Sato and your CEO, Camilla Whitmore. We have a rather pressing employment contract we need you to review. It comes with full platinum-tier medical coverage for your daughter, effective retroactively to midnight. Nolan froze, the cheap phone pressed hard against his ear. He looked down at Sophie, who was drawing a picture of a heart with a bright red crayon. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, finally spilled over his exhausted eyes. I'm listening, Nolan whispered. 6 weeks later, the 54th floor of Whitmore International looked identical, but the atmosphere had entirely changed. Nolan Pierce stepped off the elevator. He was no longer a ghost in a blue uniform. He wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit. His posture was straight, his eyes bright with the relief of a father who no longer had to choose between his pride and his daughter's life. Sophie's surgery had been fully covered and was a complete success. As Nolan walked toward the corner office that now bore his nameplate Vice President of Pacific Integration, he passed Camilla Whitmore in the hallway. Camilla looked at him. The fire of her arrogance had been completely extinguished by the board who had stripped her of her unilateral powers and placed her under strict oversight. She was a CEO in name only now. She opened her mouth to say something, perhaps a sarcastic remark, perhaps a bitter complaint. But Nolan simply looked at her, offered a perfectly measured, polite nod of professional acknowledgement, and walked past her without a single word. He didn't need to speak. His presence said everything she could never understand. Some things were simply above her pay grade. If this story of a father's sacrifice and ultimate triumph moved, you don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to show your support for Nolan's incredible journey. Share this video with friends who need a reminder that true leadership comes from humility, not arrogance. And make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories of dramatic twists and underdog victories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Nolan's shoes?